MasterTunnelRat Rewind.
Virtua Fighter 2 on the arcade systems revolutionized fighting games. It was the first step into the 3D world, so I'd like to take my respects and pay them back and... What? Huh? Wrong game, what? Virtua Fighter 2 on Genesis is a game that very quickly fell into obscurity, so I'd like to cover the critical reception of the game for you. At the time of the game's release, the public had already been familiar with the arcade version released in 1995. The game would later that year be first ported to the Sega Saturn on December 4th. The Genesis port that we're discussing today was released on March 4th, 1997, nearly an entire year and a half after the Saturn port. At this time, the Genesis was an outdated system at the far end of its lifespan, being first debuted here in America in 1988. In fact, the console was so far at the end of its lifespan that only a year later, on November 27th, 1998, both the Saturn and the Genesis would be superseded by the Dreamcast. This could be a result of the fact that the Saturn was a failure over here in America, but then again, so was the Sega Dreamcast. Sega's many failures aside, I love this game. I tried looking into the public reception of the game at its release, but from what I could find, which was very minimal, there was little to no coverage of the game. I was able to find a handful of magazine reviews of the title, but even then, I couldn't read half of them because they were in fucking French. To say the least, the public reception of the game still is and has been polarizing. French magazine Joypad gave the game a fair score of a 72. Player One, another French magazine, gave the game a 45. UK magazines Mean Machine Sega, I hate that name, that's been a bitch to pronounce, and Computer and Video Games gave the game a 77, and 3 out of 5 stars, respectively. Admittedly, these are some fairly decent scores, there's nothing awful here. However, if you were to mosey over onto Google and look up specific reviews for this port of the game, you would find this. And this. And you'd find this guy, who gave the game a fairly decent quick review. The fact of the matter is, the few reviews that do exist judge this game on the limitations of the Genesis rather than what the game is itself. Namely, the absence of the access of movement offered by the third dimension. I understand that's a critical aspect of the Virtua Fighter franchise, especially because of the fact the game pioneered the genre of 3D fighters. But when I had heard of a Virtua Fighter port on Genesis, I wasn't expecting 3 dimensions. I knew that wasn't possible. I was expecting a 2D fighter in the veins of Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. However, in terms of gameplay, this is one of the best 2D fighters I've ever played, and I can promise you that. So let's finally take a better look at this game.
Story.
There fucking is none. Or, well, that's not entirely true. The little story that there is in this game exists completely in the manual, which, for the time, is rather stock standard. What the manual does tell us is the last champion of the World Fighting Tournament, as well as some of the stakes between 2 characters, Jackie and Sarah Bryan. There's no real story here that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, but there's lore, and I'm a lore kind of guy, I can appreciate that. Let's be honest, you didn't come here for a story. You came here to kick ass!
Gameplay and mechanics.
From the main menu, you'll find an arcade mode for single-player play, which I'll be touching on shortly, a versus mode for local play, as well as an options menu. Within the options menu, you'll find settings that change you and your opponent's health, the number of matches won needed to proceed to the next stage, as well as a time limit and opponent AI setting. You'll also find a key assign, I recommend the third option, and a sound test as well. So here's a secret. If you hit left 10 times while you're hovering over exit, you'll find this. From this menu, you'll be able to choose the stage for the arcade mode, as well as hide your health gauge and your timer. It's a curious choice, that's what this looks like.
Fight 1, ready, go!
Roster.
You've got Ryu, Super Saiyan Gohan, that dude who tried to kill Goku when he was a kid. On a more serious note, There are 8 characters, each with a total of 6 different color palettes for you to choose at your liking. These are accessed via a combination of up and down on the D-pad and the A and C buttons. I'll be fair but firm. Compared to other fighting games at the time, there is something left to be desired with this roster. Mortal Kombat 3 had a roster of 12 characters in '95, and Street Fighter 2, ever since the release of Champion Edition in 1992, had a roster of 12 as well. And even worse, for a Virtua Fighter 2 port, this game is missing 2 characters, Leon Kennedy and Master Roshi.
Arcade Stage 1, Lao.
Your first opponent is Laochan. Frankly, the stage is best viewed as a tutorial, allowing you to become more familiar with the mechanics offered by the game. So, you can walk left and right, dash via a double tap, punch, kick, and block both high and low. How this game differs from other fighting games at the time is that unlike Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, where the edge of the screen acts as a wall, the edge of the screen here results in a ring out. So, we've got the basics down, beat Lao in a record time, even though he was the champion of the last World Fighting Tournament. The next character we're up against is...
Stage 2, Sarah.
In terms of difficulty, I'd argue Sarah is a half step above Lao. She might steal a round from you, however, I really don't think any of you will have any trouble getting past her. By the way, those stakes I mentioned earlier between Jackie and Sarah, she had been kidnapped and brainwashed by the Judgment 6, the cartel behind the World Fighting Tournament, and had been trained to beat Jackie. Weird, huh?
Stage 3, Pi.
So, the first 2 stages have been rather easy to get past. We've got 5 more. I really doubt we'll be having any problems. Hey, what are you doing? Humbling you. Oh, okay. Pi very much acts as the first major obstacle. She's got these really neat mid-attack grab animations that have impressed me ever since I'd first seen them. She also blocks and attacks far more often than your last opponents. She'll beat you. I promise. Did you just dab on me? Alright class, get your notebooks out because it's lesson time.
Lesson 1, Input Variation.
Something that I find extremely interesting about this game is the mechanic behind the button combos. The speed at which your character executes them actually depends on the speed of your button inputs. Check out this comparison. Pretty neat, right? But if Pi's blocking all of your attacks, that's really not going to do much, so let's go to lesson 2.
Lesson 2, Positioning.
So, now you know you punch as fast as you press. How do we utilize this? Maybe you whiff a punch, right? Hesitate a little, Pi gets a little cocky, moves in, throws a punch of her own. Then you finish the rest of your combo, burning through the space between the two of you and punishing her for trying to punish you. And now, we're getting into the reasons I so very much love this game. There's no projectile spam. This game becomes so very much based on movement and positioning, which makes sense considering it's a Virtua Fighter port. You'll find yourself slipping in and out of range, getting those pixel-perfect punches. This game's also got an amazing sense of impact. It's all just hand-to-hand combat. It's great. I really will never understand how professional review articles have described this game as stilted or jerky in terms of its animations, because look at these grab animations, man. So, Pi's kicked your ass for the better half of the last hour, but you finally managed to push on through to the next stage. Who's waiting for us?
Stage 4, Jeffrey.
Jeffrey is the game's grappler. He has some of the slowest attacks, and frankly is best viewed as a moment of respite between Pi and the next 3 stages. However, as a grappler, I recommend watching the distance between the two of you. On to the next stage.
Stage 5, Cage.
Oh boy, good fucking luck. Cage has the fastest attack speed out of the entire roster, and, unlike your other opponents, will heavily focus on ringing you out.
Ring out! Ring out! 5, 2, ready, go! Ring out! Ring out!
The best recommendation I have for this round is to focus on your mix-ups and interrupt them as often as you can. Watch out for his slide kick too. It's got the worst tell out of all the attacks in the game, making it easy to read, but I swear to God, it will infuriate you if it hits, because it's so easy to fucking read.
Stage 6 Jackie.
Hey, it's my favorite character to play as, if you haven't pieced that together so far. Jackie definitely focuses on ringing you out much less than Cage. I know it's pronounced Kage, don't yell at me. Keep your guard up. Most of his attacks are high attacks, but keep an eye out for the occasional low back fist or sweeping kick. On to the next stage.
Stage 7 Wolf.
Personally, in all my time that I've played this game, Cage and Jackie would give me a lot of problems. However, it seems as though Wolf acts as another respite stage, just like Jeffrey. His attacks are rather slow, there's not too many mix-ups, and I think you'll all fare rather okay. There's really not much else to say about him, he doesn't do anything overtly special, so we're just gonna move on to the next stage.
Final stage Akira.
Akira really is a challenge. He's got moves that no other character has prepared you for. He can break your block in more ways than one, and he's got these advancing moves that'll have him throwing you around like a sack of potatoes. He's a real challenge because of the fact that blocking is no longer a viable strategy. He'll just move around you. Those lessons I taught you in Pai's stage, I hope you've been practicing them. But man, oh man, is playing this stage always a thrill. If you manage to come out the champion of the World Fighting Tournament, you'll be met with one final quip from your character, and... what the fuck? Next stage? Dural? What the fuck is Dural? Cage's cybernetically enhanced mother? What the fuck?
Bonus stage.
I lied to you all. I'm a cheeky guy. This is a bonus for you for having stayed all the way to the end of the video. There are actually 9 stages including this bonus stage. Unlike the last 8, this one is underwater and you and your opponent's attacks and movements occur much slower. Frankly, I'd say this is a decent tutorial or practice stage as it informs you, the player, of frame data. However, I'm not too fond of actually playing the stage. It's cool, I usually beat it, but this time I didn't. Once you've either beaten or been beaten by Dural, you'll be met with the game's credits. If you had beaten Dural, you'd enter a high score screen. Unfortunately, the Genesis copy never came with an internal battery, so whatever high scores you had were fleeting. This had been my score of this run. I'd be interested if any of you were able to beat it. I'll be uploading the footage of my gameplay to the channel, and I'll be honest with you all, this had been my 3rd run. The first 2 had gone far over 40 minutes, and frankly, I felt as though that hadn't shown off my skills as best as it could. Something else I neglected to mention until now, this is my first critical review video, let me apologize, but I've been playing on these settings. Both of the health settings were at the highest, and the AI was also at the hardest setting as well. I play it like this because I fucking love the combat, it's my favorite part. On normal health settings, the rounds are a little too quick. I also turn off the time limit because all my matches go longer than 30 seconds, let's be honest.
Final notes.
So, there are a few things I'd like to still mention. The game is on Fightcade for those of you wanting to verse some of your friends. I can promise you, everything I've said about positioning and button input timing is so much more fun against a friend. I've actually versed my friend Danalized a couple of times. I usually kick his ass. There's also a Steam release. I've never tried it myself though, it's only $1, but I don't believe there's any kind of net play. So frankly, I believe Fightcade might be your best bet, especially considering the game's free.
If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe for more.